That's it, man. 19 games played in the Premier League, halfway done in the season. It is dark times at Chelsea Football Club, man. Tonight was, dark. Chelsea 2, Bournemouth 2. Diabolical. Defending diabolical in the first 30 minutes. Attacking decisions diabolical across the pitch. Bar obviously the one man we know that we entrust our entire Chelsea club to for the future, Estevao. And I said it earlier in the season. You just got to build this club on Estevao and Santos. You do. You got to build the club around them, man, because these are the two guys that are going to usher you into the future. You need to go and add some serious firepower now. Now, look, I've sort of said all season that Chelsea's squad is actually good. I said it's more than decent, more than good enough to be pushing for top 4, top 5. And I stick by it. I truly believe it. I don't think that this squad is bad. But the one thing I'm going to say, right, because I think there's two major problems. There's a coaching problem. Sorry, I just got distracted by the Arsenal game. There's a coaching problem and then there's a player problem. And I have to talk about both sides of what is causing Chelsea to struggle right now. And where I'm going to start is, there's actually 3 problems. Where I'm going to start is, let's start at the club level, okay? Because I don't agree with people saying that the recruitment has been horrible. I actually don't. I actually think the recruitment has been, in terms of statistics, right? I fully understand why every player was purchased at this club. I can see how on paper all of these players fit the model or the style of football, or at least the club sort of philosophy. Young players, high potential, work within that kind of system, possession-based, dominant football. But the one thing you can't account for, and this is one thing that the owners probably need to get comfortable with early doors, is that your statistics are not necessarily an indicator of good decision making. They might be an indicator of what decisions are being made previously, but they're not an indicator of what decisions will be made going forward. But you know what the crazy thing is? As I even say that, I think that must obviously not be true, because that's the whole point of relying on statistics and stats, is that you should be able to tell, track, and indicate where a player is going to be at a certain time based on what you've seen from them before. But the problem is football works so differently to any other sport. With football, it's so many different things that can contribute to what makes a player good or what makes a player play in their best form. Sometimes it can be the reaction to the fans. Sometimes it can be their status with the club or reaction to things going on in the club. Sometimes it can be their personal life. Sometimes it can be the other players that they work with. So looking at individual player statistics, right, and information is not a good enough indicator to know whether they will be able to survive in the environment you're creating. This is where I will hold criticism for the club's model currently, because I think they're buying players, coach, sporting directors and owners are all in cahoots in buying players that they think on paper should make sense at Chelsea. What I don't think they are doing well enough is buying players that they know are good footballers regardless of where they go. So the reason why someone like Semenyo looks like such a good buy right now is because he was doing this at Newport or wherever he was in sort of like the lower leagues, non-league and all these things, right? He was doing this at Newport and he'd been doing it at Bournemouth consistently. So you can kind of see that it's not just a Bournemouth thing, it's a Semenyo thing. This is why I say that when I look at players like Gittins and they're struggling, or Delap and he's struggling, or Pedro Neto and he's struggling, I'm going, this is actually an issue with these individual players. Because there's no evidence to suggest where they've been before that it was them issue why they were succeeding. right? But I can also give grace to the owners for making these mistakes because you have to buy players anyway. The deeper issue for me comes down to the coaching and the players individually, which is why I talked about it from a club side, right? The coaching problem I see is from today's result, yeah. What I can tell Maresca is doing is Maresca is coaching these players like they're adults. And I don't think you can do that anymore. I don't think 19 games in, when you're potentially 6th, 3 or 4 points off 4th and 5th, if that's the case by the end of tonight, right? I don't think you can afford to start treating them like they're adults now. I think you have to take the Mourinho approach. What do I mean by Mourinho approach? Pep just recently said if his players come back overweight, they're not playing. That's how you treat your son. Arsenal 3-0 up. Wow, crazy times. Yeah, that's how you treat your son. That's how you treat your kids. If you're not doing what I've asked you to do, you will not be taking part in what you want to take part in. So you need to pattern up expeditiously. I remember Chelsea of old, Mourinho, Joe Cole, in game, makes a decision. I think there was an in-game decision where he was telling him to pass the ball or not dribble or something like that, and he didn't do what Mourinho asked him to do. Mourinho dropped him, and then basically Mourinho went on to tell him like, "Listen, if that happens again, you're not going to play for me again." And I think you need to take that approach with these players now. I think you need to start treating them like they are. You need to start treating them like kids. And you need to start saying them, listen, you guys from now on have no more autonomy. The only people that get autonomy are the ones that earn autonomy from me. Esteval, you've earned autonomy. Palmer, you've earned autonomy. Caicedo, you've earned autonomy. Reece James, you've earned autonomy. The rest of you, Delap, João Pedro, Enzo Fernandez, Pedro Neto, Chalobah, Fofana even, Gusto especially, you get no autonomy. Cucurella is another one that can get autonomy. The rest of you have to do exactly what I say. Garnacho, Gittins. And if you don't do what I say, and you are also not producing the results, you're not playing. I'll bring kids from the academy if I have to. That should be the way that this coach manages this team from now on. Because look, everyone can point the fingers at the board, right? But you've also got young players here that are capable. You've got your Tyreek George that can come in as a left winger. Yeah? Last season we had like Genesis Antwi. We had a couple Donnies that came on and played right wing. You've got Joshua Chempong there. Yeah? You've got some kids in the academy that can come in and step in. Who's Reggie Walsh? Why not put these players right at the precipice where you start saying to the senior guys, if you don't start playing, these boys are going to take your spot. For me, this is what needs to be said. It needs to be said from now on. Because what is happening right now is actually going to be a systemic issue that continues if they don't understand the gravity of the job and the task they have. I'm seeing players walking. You've only been at the club 6 months. That's insane to me. So I think that's a coaching problem, right? And I think that's what separates the top guys. The top guys will drop you in a heartbeat. Injuries, yes, they can force you to have to play a certain way and play certain players, right? But for me, now the club brief to Maresca has to be, listen, start telling the players from now, if they're not patterning up, we're moving them on. Don't care how young you are. Start to goal given, 3-0. Start to really instill this in the players now. Get it into their heads. We will chop and change. Which is actually why I think we've seen some briefs for Semenyo's and other players recently to try and, yeah. But I will agree that some of the replacements we've bought in the summer have not been good enough. I can concede that now. After 19 games halfway through, I think it's a good enough barometer now. They've not been good enough now. And it's a disappointing thing. Now the players' problem. Gusto, defensively, offensively, bad decisions. Chalobah, that second goal, you can't let that happen. I now have to concede. I love Chalobah with all my heart. Think he's a great guy. Don't think he's going to cut it. Don't think he's going to cut it because there's one thing to say that you are not necessarily like. I want to be very, very cautious here about what I say because I'm not one to diss people, right? But I think it's one thing to be inconsistent. It's another thing not to be able to help lead your team. And I worry about that with Chalobah. Now, that's not a dig. It's just what I think. It's just my opinion. And I sometimes look at Chalobah and think, I don't know if he helps add to the composure. In the same way, I don't think Fofana helps add to the composure. But because Fofana is such a competent on-ball, off-ball defender, except for when he's defending in a low block situation, there's people running off him, he can actually circumvent it. But that's my issue with Gusto as well. Is off-ball, on-ball, he don't make great decisions. Garnacho, I actually look at Garnacho now and think, yes, I think he was the more priority signing because you needed to get someone with Premier experience. But I look at Garnacho and just think he's actually a great example of what happens when you give academy players too much too soon. Not that he's entitled, not that he's arrogant, but his skill set needs to be improved. And I think he's got too high in the footballing world too soon. That's a player that I now think, unfortunately, is never going to reach the height of his potential because he's been exposed to too harsh an environment too early. And there's some players that do just sink or swim straight away. Esteval's one of them, but Esteval's been playing first team men football since he's like 16, right? So you condition over time. I don't think Garnacho's had the same kind of thing. So I actually think Garnacho needs to be loaned. If it was up to me, I'd send Garnacho on loan, keep Gittins, bring in a proper winger, and let Garnacho go and grow. That's what I would do. Me personally. Palmer, I got no issues with him, but what I can see, part of the issue for Palmer is he's playing too fast for the team. But you can't ask a player like that to do any different because he's a genius. So you can't ask an A-grade student to work at a C-grade level. It don't make sense. So we know that they need to put better players around him. Sanchez does well and has massively improved, now giving props. But the issue with Sanchez is in high contention situations, he doesn't add calm. He makes the saves, right? But he doesn't encourage composure. You see him on every throw-in. He's there in the mix, pushing people off. He shouldn't be doing that. Stay on your goal line. Shout from your goal line. Hey. Because even the Chalobah one, he's pushing people out the way, which forces the group of players further, which means when the ball comes in and Chalobah jumps, he's underneath it, which means Sanchez is not at the back post early enough. But if he stays in the centre of the goal, middle of the goal, and doesn't come to get involved in a foray, he can get across. You could talk about so many players. Delap is maybe the last one I'll say, right? Before I talk about Pedro Neto. And he's the last player I'm going to talk about. Delap, too eager, too one-dimensional. And I think this all comes down to, for me, what I would say fitness. I look at Delap and think, this is why I say Gyökeres, if you were to look at these players like Pokemon, Gyökeres is like the second evolved version of Delap. Delap's like the baby Pokemon. Do you get it? And then there's a step in between, which is like Ipswich Delap, which we saw, which is like Delap in a really good situation, really fit, really hungry, knows exactly what his job is, right? But for me, that's Delap. Gyökeres is who Delap could become, but right now he's too eager, especially to get into scuffles, and too one-dimensional. And it's weird because he wasn't doing this at Ipswich, but all of a sudden it's like he knows the fight's coming, so he's playing into the fight rather than just playing for the ball. And it's going to me, okay, yeah, like I can tell again, you were made in an academy. You're not a Screets will never forget baller. Because the Screets that never forget ballers, yeah, they have a way of touching the ball, a way of playing the ball. It comes in a ruggedness, a dog type mentality. Even if you crush me, I'm going to get up, roll the ball. That's what João Pedro has. But we're playing João Pedro out of position. He's not a 10. He should never play in the 10. He hasn't got the composure as a 10. He's a striker. You can see every opportunity he wants to create space and whack it, crash it. So it's dark right now. And then Pedro Neto. I'm not going to say anything other than I respect Pedro Neto's hustle. I respect how hard he works. And I will always give him the credit for what he does off the ball when he's at his best. But unfortunately, since we've seen João Pedro do this, he's gone downhill. And that is what worries me. People can cook Garnacho at 21 years old for sitting on the advertising boards when he scores. But the truth is he's 21. He will learn, hopefully. right? But at his age, that's what you do when you're that age. For Pedro Neto, for me, it's insanity. It's insanity that he spams crosses. He doesn't release the ball quick enough. His touches always take him into players. It's crazy times. Arsenal 4-0. Wow. Crazy. And so this is where we're at right now, Chelsea fans, man. It's dark times. And this is why I say people just got to suck it up right now. Because we're in our time, our era, where we've just got to watch and learn and be humble enough to accept that right now we're in dark times. You have to firm it. I don't think what the club is doing is wrong. I think it's going to take time and take patience. And you're going to have to wait to see it really come to fruition. But at the same time, there's mistakes being made by players and staff that is contributing to the downfall. And it has to be better. It has to be so much better. So that's my 10 pence. That's my thoughts. Very disappointing result today from the Chelsea, but 19 more games of the season to go. My philosophy has always been how I've seen Chelsea be when I've grown up, is if you can't win the league, you win a trophy. So now you've got to lock into the Carabao Cup games. You've got to lock into the FA Cup games coming. You've got to lock into the Champions League, and you've got to try and get the most out of it. If this season ends trophyless, that's a very bad season. I would say that. That would be my defining thought. If you don't get top 4 and you end the season trophyless, very dark times. Very, very dark times. But playing in the Europa League might be, and I said this after the Conference League, it might be what Chelsea need. I'm not going to lie to you. It might be what Chelsea need. Chelsea might just have to go and prove their stripes. Conference League, Europa League, Champions League. There's no shame. People think there's shame in being down there. Listen, how many times the English teams compete and how many times the English teams win the Champions League? The last English team to win the Champions League was Man City in 2023. That's 2 years ago. Then it was Liverpool, right? In 2018, or was it 2019? I think it was 2018. Right? That's how many years ago now? 7 years ago. And then Chelsea in between that in 2021, 4 years ago. So it's not like English teams are dominating year in, year out, year in, year out. That's not what's happening. Right? And out of those teams that are winning the Champions League, how many of them are even going on to win leagues? We've not seen Arsenal win the Champions League. We've not seen Man United win the Champions League since 2008. Do you get it? How many of these teams are even making finals? So regardless, if you're not going to get top 4, you have to win a trophy. That is it. If Chelsea end this season without top 4 and trophyless, this will be, for me, one of the worst Chelsea seasons I've seen since being a supporter. So there's a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of ground to gain. I think they can do it, but it's going to take a lot. That's my 10 pence. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Hit that like and subscribe button. Hit the bell notification icon to get a notification every single time I upload. And my Chelsea family, one more game, and I promise you now, I think we're getting tucked against City. No Caicedo. It's going to be dark. It's going to be dark. But we'll see. We'll do our best. See you in the next video, my people. Take care. Don't stress and stay blessed. Peace.